My name is Nathan. I've always been a hard-working man, someone who believes in earning his way, taking responsibility, and standing by the people I care about. But if there's one thing life has drilled into me, it's this: loving the wrong people can destroy you. And I had to learn that lesson the hard way. This is the story of how it all unraveled. When I met Melissa, she was a widow raising 2 young kids on her own. Tyler, just 4 at the time, was a bundle of energy, always running around with his toy cars, full of endless questions. Sophia was still a baby, barely able to walk, constantly clinging to her mother. Their father, a military officer, had died in action, a hero, but heroes don't come home. That left Melissa alone, struggling to keep her life together while raising 2 kids. She was exhausted, and I saw it. I saw a woman who had been through hell, doing everything alone. So I stepped in. Not because I had to. Not because anyone asked me to. I did it because I wanted to. I wanted to give these kids the kind of stability they had lost, to be the father they no longer had, to make sure they never felt like something was missing. And for years, that's exactly what I did. I worked long hours, but I never let my job take me away from my family. I made sure Tyler and Sophia had everything they needed: good schools, new clothes, a roof over their heads, and food on the table every single night. But it wasn't just about providing for them financially. I was there for them in every way that mattered. Every school event. I was front and center, clapping the loudest. Every birthday. There was cake, presents, and laughter. Every vacation. I made sure they had memories to cherish forever. They didn't just call me Nathan. No, they called me Dad. And I believed it. They loved me like a father, and I loved them as if they were my own flesh and blood. I felt like the luckiest man alive. But life has a way of shifting just when you think everything is perfect. At first, it was small, little disrespectful comments here and there, nothing major. I brushed them off, telling myself it was just a phase, that they were growing up and testing boundaries. But I was wrong. I had no idea what was coming. People always say raising teenagers is tough. They get moody, push back, act like they know everything. I expected that. What I didn't expect was how fast everything I had built would be thrown back in my face. Tyler turned 17 and suddenly thought he was too grown for rules. He started coming home late, ignoring curfews, brushing off my advice like it didn't matter. Sophia, at 14, followed right behind him, rolling her eyes, ignoring me, acting like my words meant nothing. I'd ask them to clean up after themselves. They wouldn't. I'd remind them about schoolwork, they'd shrug and walk away. I'd try to have real conversations with them, they'd barely listen. And when I set boundaries? Oh, they pushed back hard. I wasn't asking for much, just basic respect. But to them, rules weren't about structure or discipline, they were about control, about me trying to run their lives. And here's where it got worse: every time the kids talked back, I'd turn to Melissa, expecting her to step in, to remind them that I wasn't the enemy. But she never did. She'd just sit there, silent. Maybe she'd pretend to be distracted by her phone, maybe she'd sigh like I was the one overreacting. At first, I made excuses for her. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she didn't want to start another fight. Maybe she was just trying to keep the peace. But over time, it became painfully clear, this wasn't just her being passive. She was allowing them to treat me this way. And that should have been my first real wake-up call. The night everything changed is burned into my memory. Tyler had been staying out later and later. That night, he walked in past midnight, no call, no text, just strolled in like he owned the place. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't even angry. I simply asked, "Where have you been?" I expected some guilt, maybe even an apology. Instead, he rolled his eyes and muttered, "Relax, I'm not a kid." That's when I told him, "You live under my roof, you follow my rules. If you can't respect that, then we have a problem." He looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not my real dad. Stop acting like you own me." For a second, I felt my entire body go cold. And then, as if that wasn't enough, Sophia, my sweet little Sophia, nodded and added, "Yeah, you're just some guy our mom married." I turned to Melissa, waiting for her to say something, anything, to correct them, to tell them they were out of line. She didn't. She just stood there. No anger. No disappointment. Nothing. That moment, that was when something inside me cracked. You'd think that after everything I had done for them, after all the years I spent raising them, there would be a limit to how much disrespect I'd have to swallow. But there wasn't. Because just a few days later, it happened again. This time, it wasn't just Tyler mouthing off or Sophia backing him up. This time, Melissa joined in. It started over something simple. Sophia had left a mess in the kitchen, dirty plates piled in the sink, crumbs all over the counter, juice spilled on the floor. I calmly told her to clean up after herself, just basic responsibility. But instead of doing it, she looked me in the eye and said, "Why don't you do it? It's your house, isn't it?" That stung. Before I could even respond, Tyler chimed in, "Why are you always trying to boss us around? You're not even our real dad." And then came Melissa's voice. Soft. Casual. Like what she was about to say wasn't going to stick with me forever. "They have a point, Nathan. Maybe you should ease up." She didn't even look up from her phone. Didn't even have the decency to meet my eyes. I can't explain what happened inside me at that moment. It wasn't just anger. It wasn't just hurt. It was clarity. That was it. That was the moment I knew I was done. That night I sat alone in the dark, lost in thought. Thinking about all the years I had spent raising those kids. Thinking about all the sacrifices I had made. Thinking about how, after everything, I meant nothing to them. And if I was nothing to them, then maybe it was time I started acting like it. So I did something I should have done a long time ago. I stopped. I stopped giving. I stopped caring. I stopped trying. No more rides to school. If they wanted to get there, they could figure it out. No more allowances. I wasn't their personal bank. No more stepping in when they got into trouble. If they made a mess, they could clean it up themselves. No more advice. No more help. No more fatherly concern. They didn't want me as a father. Fine. Let them see what life was like without one. And I won't lie, it hurt. More than I can even put into words. But deep down, I knew it was the only way. Funny how some people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. How they think they can treat you like garbage and expect you to keep taking it. That was Tyler, Sophia, and Melissa. At first, they thought it was a joke. They laughed, shrugging it off like my decision didn't matter. Good. Now we don't have to deal with him bossing us around. Mom's got us. We don't need him. I overheard them saying it one day. And for a while, they didn't feel the impact. Because Melissa? She made sure to pick up my slack. She covered their shopping trips, made sure their weekends were still filled with fast food outings, kept the spending going like nothing had changed. She kept them comfortable, kept them cocky, and kept feeding them the lie that they didn't need me. They smirked when I walked past, whispered sarcastic little comments under their breath, acted like I was invisible. But I stayed quiet. Because I knew something they didn't. Melissa wasn't made of money. And I was the one who had been holding this family together. So I waited. And then it happened. At first, it was just small things. The weekend shopping sprees got shorter, fewer bags made their way home. The fast food runs became less frequent. The new clothes stopped piling up in their closets. Then, it got worse. School fees were due. Melissa started getting nervous. Tyler got into trouble at school. Normally, I would have stepped in, handled things, talked to the principal. Not this time. Sophia's phone broke. Normally, I would have replaced it without hesitation. Not this time. And worst of all, no more Uber rides. They actually had to do something they never thought they'd have to do, take the bus. I still remember that first morning. Tyler missed his ride because he assumed someone would cover for him. When he finally realized no one was coming, he had to sprint 3 blocks just to catch the city bus. Sophia, frustrated, turned to Melissa and whined, "Why can't you just get us another ride?" And Melissa's response? "Because I don't have the money for that right now." The moment I heard those words, I smiled. Because I knew, the reality check had arrived. It took about a month before Melissa finally cracked. One night, I came home from work to find her waiting for me in the kitchen, arms crossed, face red, already gearing up for a fight. "You're being a damn child, Nathan. What kind of man punishes his own family just because his feelings are hurt? You're neglecting your responsibilities." I just stood there, staring at her. Because there it was, that word. Responsibilities. Not love. Not family. Not respect. No, to her, I was just a responsibility. A provider. So I asked her, plain and simple, "Why do you never defend me? Why do you always let them talk to me like that?" And that's when she slipped. She sneered and said, "Because I agree with them, Nathan. You were never really their father." I felt something inside me turn ice cold. And she didn't stop. "I told them not to let you control them. I raised them alone before you, and I can do it again." I should have been angry. Maybe even heartbroken. But you know what I felt? Relief. Because finally, she said it out loud. Finally, I knew the truth. I was never their father. Never her partner. Just a walking paycheck. A convenience. Tyler and Sophia stood in the hallway, watching, arms crossed, smug little looks on their faces. This was it. This was who they really were. I nodded. I turned around and walked away. Not because I was weak. But because I was done. I've always believed that when people show you who they truly are, you should believe them. And now, I had no choice but to accept the truth. But things didn't stop there. Ever since I cut off their easy life, the kids started getting more aggressive. And in the days that followed, it escalated. At first, my personal belongings started going missing. One morning, I went to grab my work files I had neatly stacked on my desk the night before, only to find them gone. Then, my car. It was parked safely in the driveway overnight. The next morning, I walked out to find deep scratches running along the driver's side. At first, I didn't want to believe they were capable of something like this. But then I came home one night to find my closet ransacked. My clothes, shredded, torn to pieces, scattered across the floor like trash. That was when I checked the security cameras. And there they were. Tyler and Sophia. Laughing. Destroying my things like it was some kind of game. For weeks, I played along. I let them think they had won. I remained quiet, distant, unaffected, even as they tried harder and harder to provoke me. But behind the scenes, I was documenting everything. I recorded their threats. Saved every hostile text message. Took pictures of every piece of property they destroyed. And made sure I had all the proof I needed, clear, undeniable evidence of the toxic environment I had been living in. That was the moment I stopped waiting for things to change and started planning my exit. Quietly, I met with a lawyer, laying everything out in detail, the threats, the destruction of my belongings, the constant hostility I endured. I handed over every piece of documentation I had gathered over time. My lawyer listened, went through the evidence carefully, and assured me I had a strong case for divorce. Given the circumstances, I was even advised that I could file for a restraining order if necessary. It wasn't an overnight process. Weeks were spent in legal meetings, filling out paperwork, making formal reports. I took the extra step of filing a police report for the property damage, not because I expected them to kick down the door, but because having a documented history of threats made my case even stronger. And then, one morning, after everything was in place, I left an envelope on the kitchen counter before heading to work. Inside were the divorce papers. I imagine, at first, Melissa thought I was bluffing. But when I didn't answer her calls, when she actually opened the second set of documents, the frantic messages started pouring in. Attached to the divorce papers were copies of my police report, all my documentation, every single piece of evidence. My lawyer had advised me to include it, not just to strengthen my case, but to make sure I protected myself from any false accusations she might throw at me. I ignored her calls. By the time she saw those papers, I was already gone. I had packed up the things that mattered to me and left. Our joint bank accounts? Closed. Any money she thought she had access to? Gone. Everything had been in my name. And I had made sure she had no legal right to any of it. For the first time, she was truly on her own. And once Melissa realized she couldn't reach me, the texts started coming in. At first, they were full of rage. "You're such a coward, Nathan. You ran away the second things got tough. A real man doesn't abandon his family. I don't need you. I can take care of my kids just fine without you." It was ironic. The same woman who had encouraged those kids to push me aside, who stood by while they treated me like I didn't exist, now, she was playing the victim. Now, she was acting like I had walked out on them. But the truth? They had discarded me long before I ever packed my bags. So I didn't respond. I didn't argue. There was no point. Weeks passed. Then months. The messages from Melissa slowed down. Probably because she had finally realized what it meant to be on her own. No more financial safety net. No more easy spending. She had always bragged about being independent, about not needing me. But I knew better. She had gotten too comfortable in the life I had provided. And now, without me, that life was gone. Then, out of nowhere, the messages started coming from a different source. The kids. The first one was short. "Hey, can we talk?" I left it unread. A few days later, another message came in. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but things aren't great right now." Still, I didn't reply. Then Sophia reached out. "Hey, Nathan. I just wanted to say that I hope you're doing okay." I stared at my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. But I didn't type anything. Over the next few weeks, the messages kept coming. At first, they were casual, a weak attempt to start a conversation. Then, slowly, the regret started creeping in. "I just wanted to say sorry for everything. We should have treated you better. Things have been hard since you left. Mom, she's not handling things well." And then, the one that almost made me laugh. "I miss you." I let the messages sit there, unanswered. I didn't acknowledge them. Because I was finally free. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of this: never let people take you for granted. Never beg for respect. Never waste your time trying to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it. And most importantly, when you realize you're being used, walk away. Because some people only recognize your value once it's gone. And by then, it's too damn late. Walking away from Melissa and the kids was the hardest thing I ever did. Not because I still wanted them in my life. But because, for too long, I had convinced myself that I needed them. That being a good man meant enduring disrespect. That love meant sacrificing my dignity. But I was wrong. A man who values himself doesn't stay where he isn't appreciated. Now, I live for myself. I focus on my career, my goals, my happiness. I spend time with people who actually care about me. I've reconnected with old friends. I've traveled. I've started hobbies I never had time for before. I don't wake up every morning bracing for the next fight. I wake up free. And that, my friends, is how I took my life back.